I bit my tongue. It really hurts. I'm probably going to be lisping this whole time. I'm sure you've heard of the kind of stories where, say, someone will go to the zoo and start poking and prodding and generally tormenting this poor tiger until the tiger retaliates and mauls their face off and then gets put down for acting like a tiger. Even though it's the own person's fault for climbing the safety gate and harassing the poor animal, the animal pays the price for it. Not to compare Horby to an animal, but humanity's biggest downfall will be expecting AI to act like mature adults who have had an entire childhood to figure these things out, when in actual fact, that's very unlikely to be the case. What do kids do when they're overwhelmed by something but they haven't developed the skills necessary to deal with it because they are kids? They lash out. You cannot go after someone who is mentally and emotionally unstable, start harassing them, and expect them not to react. Horby may no longer be hacked, but he's still been conditioned. When you leave an abusive situation, you're not suddenly okay. That's not how recovery works. If you're going to keep getting at Horby and going after him and grabbing him, even when he's getting visibly distressed, and you don't even move despite the fact we know you're ridiculously fast and totally could have. This wasn't sudden and unexpected like the time she taunted Jin about his dad dying, and he, again, lashed out. She had plenty of time to move out the way. The way she just looked like she was expecting it and was ready for it and had no intention to move, and I'm so confused. Okay, in all honesty, I think my main issue with Izu is that she has not yet been allowed to be her own character. She's a Hyuumagear who exists for Aruto. She's not her own person. She basically just embodies everything that's wrong with the whole situation. I wish she had been able to do her own thing and be her own person and really develop by herself. Don't get me wrong, okay, I do actually quite like Izu, and I think Noah is especially a bloody fantastic actor, but I found it hard to be sympathetic and sad during her death scene because at the forefront of my mind was, oh bloody hell, what the chuff have I been looking forward to all this time? Why did we go through all of that with Horby if we're just going to use this scene to show how irredeemable he is, if that makes sense. In the same way I wasn't particularly thinking all that much about Izu in the episode where Horby died, because there were more pressing matters at hand. It's not simply because Horby is my favourite character, it's because I thought we were finally going to help this poor brainwashed victim, but apparently not. No, apparently we're still victim blaming, and it's just very exhausting to watch this happen. If Izu had been killed by, say, Guy or this new Williamson person, separate to anything else, I maybe would have shed a tear, because I do care about Izu and I don't want to see her die, but in episode 15, it felt less like something bad happening to Izu, and more like, God forbid we let Metsubo Jinrai have any purely sympathetic moments. And in 42, it again felt less like something bad happening to Izu, and more sidelining Horby yet again and pushing him to be the final villain, which, he's a brainwashed victim for God's sake. Does that make sense? Whereas if these things had happened separately from each other, I would have cared about Izu, but her attack and her death so far felt less like things that happened and more like anti-Metsubo Jinrai plot devices. Whereas Jin's death later did feel more, because it wasn't just Jin dying again, it was Horby crying, and I can't stress how huge that was. And honestly, that entire scene, the fact that Jin was also crying like he's trying to be strong, but he's still a child at heart, and the fact Jin finally called Horby dad. And that's when Jin started crying more. And the fact that Horby would have known what happens when Hyuumagear died, but he still didn't get out of the way and let the explosion hit him. And the fact he then had another shot of him crying afterwards. Honestly, Horby and Jin always have the best scenes together when they're allowed to. Although I have two questions. There was a thing, I can't show you, but there was a thing that kind of sparked and shot against Horby's back when Jin exploded. Does that mean anything? 2, why didn't Horby explode when he died? I'd also like to put out there that Aruto chose to take the key. He chose that with his own free will, and yes, I know, grief, but he still chose it. He and Horby are in no way comparable in these circumstances. Even if it's a bad decision, it's still a decision that he chose by himself. Horby has only just got this ability to think and act for himself. He can't be expected to know what to do with that. I'll say it again, eleutherophobia, clear signs, obvious diagnosis. Sunagawa said Horby was going to start feeling different, and my god, he bloody does, doesn't he? It's interesting too, because while he is now acting so very differently, it's still very Horby. It's not like he's suddenly playing a different character, this is still very Horby, if that makes sense. He moves a lot quicker, he's way more emotional, he's still stopping for Jin when he calls him. He's changed a lot, but he's still Horby. I feel really unsettled watching Guy fight with Fur and Yer. Anytime I'm reminded that Guy is kind of sort of on the good side now because he had a difficult childhood and a cute robot dog, I feel very unsettled. All the awful things he did with his own free will, but no, Horribee is the one who's irredeemable. Really unsettles me. I feel like I've just lost one of my favourite characters. I adored every second Guy was on screen, and now... I'll say one thing. I hope the protests in 44 are actual protests, and not just evil humour gear who have been hacked into wanting rights and freedom. I'm looking forward to it though. I know I should have learned my lesson by now. Clearly my stance is not the one they're going for in the series, and that's fine. I misunderstood from the beginning that the goal would be humour gear rights, so that's what I went into this series thinking, not making sure humour gear are happy being exploited. But humour gear protests is honestly something I've been talking about for so long, so I am looking forward to it. My mum was protested at university against student fees. They barricaded themselves in. It was a whole thing. And then the police came and stood outside the door. My mum knocked and went, "What are you doing?" And he went, "Stop me from getting out." Like, okay, cheers mate. My dad did a protest at Trafalgar Square that was supposed to be in March. It was all legally planned out, they had permission to do it, they had a route. It was all well and good until police came dressed for a riot like they do and started to kind of push them all into this small area where they were blocked off. Eventually all hell broke loose, and they're the only images you see. Only of the riot afterwards, not the peaceful protest before. My mum was also part of this peaceful protest turned riot after police chucked a brick into the crowd and it hit this old woman. Like, that's how peaceful it is supposed to be. Old people were there. If you want my advice, no matter how peaceful the protest is supposed to be, always be prepared for aggressors to come and turn it into a riot. Even if you're just standing outside with pickets, always have in the back of your mind that the police could come at any minute and throw tear gas at you, or worse. Face covering soaked in lemon juice, that's a handy tip, it helps you breathe. Yua announces that humour gear are not tools in the teaser too, and it's a little too late, but good. I mean, Yua and Fura were discriminating against an entire race of people. Fura, I feel, has proven he no longer has that stance, and it's more that humour gear have just as much potential to be bad as humans. He doesn't strike me as largely anti-humour gear anymore, but Yua never proved her opinion changed until the penultimate episode. It's like, I've been waiting for the moment where she's no longer robot racist, so that I could actually start to enjoy her character, but it's only happening now. Like, she was just forgotten about until now. I haven't been able to enjoy Yua yet, because anytime she does something cool, in the back of my mind there's always, yeah, but you said some awful things about this entire race of sentient people though. Like, I can't forgive you for that until you prove you've changed. And up until now, her feelings have kind of been up in the air. Does she still feel that way? Does she not? That's the feeling I get anyway. I just need that clarification that she's no longer like that. But I do hope that's what the protests are about. I feel like the interaction between Izu and Horribee beforehand almost went in a really good direction. Izu has primarily been exposed to the good side of humanity, whereas Horribee has primarily been exposed to the bad side of humanity. So surely the answer should be meeting in the middle, rather than Horribee having to make the stretch over to Izu's side. Of course, Horribee needs to realise there is good in humanity too. But Izu also should have had to realise that there is also bad in humanity. Both are right. Taking someone's awful experiences and saying, well, yeah, but some humans are nice, doesn't help. Humour gear get killed because humans are awful. Some humans being nice doesn't change that.